We're gonna read. I'm gonna read Fyodor Dostoyevsky, The Idiot. It's not that big of a book, but I mean the quantity. So, and beside that, I'm gonna start Rimbaud, Une saison en enfer, suivi des Illuminations, and Claudio Manella, Caso Rossetti, very thin book. Wow. And Albert Camus, Le mythe de Sisyphe. And that's it. Besides Albert Camus, L'étranger. And Science ou Plus. Almost every night. I can do it 3 or 4 of them every night. It's gonna finish in a couple of months, one or 2 months. Okay, let's start. First part 1, Idiot Dostoyevsky. Towards the end of November, during a warm spell, at around 9 o'clock in the morning, a train of the Petersburg-Warsaw line was approaching Petersburg at full steam. It was so damp and foggy that dawn could barely break. 10 paces to right or left of the line, it was hard to make out anything at all through the carriage windows. Among the passengers, there were some who were returning from abroad, but the third-class compartments were more crowded, and they were all petty business folk from not far away. Everyone was tired, as usual. Everyone's eyes had grown heavy overnight. Everyone was chilled. Everyone's face was pale yellow, matching the color of the fog. In one of the third-class carriages, at dawn, 2 passengers found themselves facing each other just by the window. Both young men, both traveling light, both unfashionably dressed, both with rather remarkable physiognomies. Physiognomies? I don't know that words. I can guess what the meaning, and both finally willing to get into conversation with each other. If they had known what was so remarkable about the one and the other at that moment, they would certainly have marveled at the chance that had so strangely seated them facing each other in the third-class carriage of the St. Petersburg-Warsaw train. One of them was of medium height, about 27 years old, with curly, almost black hair and small but fiery gray eyes. He had a broad, flat nose and high cheekbones. His thin lips were constantly twisting into a sort of impudent, mocking, and even malicious smile. But his forehead was high and well formed, and made up for the lack of nobility in the lower part of his face. Especially notable was the deathly pallor of his face, which gave the young man's whole physiognomy an exhausted look, despite his rather robust build, and at the same time suggested something passionate to the point of suffering, which was out of harmony with his insolence and a coarse smile and his sharp, self-satisfied gaze. He was warmly dressed in an ample lambskin coat covered with black cloth and had not been cold during the night, while his neighbor had been forced to bear on his chilled back all the sweetness of a damp Russian November. November night, for which he was obviously not prepared. He was wearing a rather ample and thick sleeveless cloak with an enormous hood, the sort often worn by winter travelers somewhere far abroad, in Switzerland or northern Italy, for instance, certainly not reckoning on such long distances as from Eidkuhnen. It doesn't say it spells Eidkuhnen, but it doesn't matter. Eidkuhnen to Petersburg. It's a town, I think. But what was proper and quite satisfactory in Italy turned out to be not entirely suitable to Russia. The owner of the cloak with the hood was a young man, also about 26 or 27 years old, slightly taller than average, with very blonde, thick hair, sunken cheeks, and a sparse, pointed, nearly white little beard. His eyes were big, blue, and intense. Their gaze had something quiet but heavy about it, and was filled with that strange expression by which some are able to guess at first sight that the subject has the falling sickness. The young man's face, however, was pleasant, fine, and dry, but colorless, and now even blue with cold. From his hands dangled a meager bundle made of old, faded foulard, is French word, foulard, containing apparently all his traveling possessions. On his feet he had thick-soled shoes with gaiters, all not the Russian way. His black-haired companion in the lambskin coat took all this in, partly from having nothing to do, and finally asked, with that tactless grin which sometimes expresses so unceremoniously and carelessly people's pleasure in their neighbors' misfortunes, "Chilly?" And he hunched his shoulders. "Very," his companion replied with extreme readiness, "and note that this is a warm spell. What if it were freezing? It didn't even occur to me that it was so cold at home. I'm unaccustomed to it." "Coming from abroad, are you?" "Yes, from Switzerland." "Whoa, fancy that." The black-haired man whistled and laughed. They got to talking. Lots of description, well, it's 19th century literature. Lots of detail, and it goes for the long-term context. What do you mean by that? Like, you need to read through it to understand what he says. But nowadays, you can, ask for the resume or summary from LLMs, large language models. But it's a pleasure to read, for sure. Yeah. They got to talking. The readiness of the blond young man in the Swiss cloak to answer all his swarthy companion's questions was astonishing and betrayed no suspicion of the utter carelessness, idleness, and impropriety of some of the questions. In answering them, he said, among other things, that he had indeed been away from Russia for a long time, more than 4 years, that he had been sent abroad on account of illness, some strange nervous illness like the falling sickness or Saint Vitus's dance, some sort of trembling and convulsions. Listening to him, the swarthy man grinned several times. He laughed, particularly when, to his question, and did they cure you? The blond man answered, no, they didn't. Huh, got all that money for nothing, and we go believing them. The swarthy man remarked caustically. That's the real truth. A poorly dressed gentleman who was sitting nearby broke into the conversation. Some sort of encrusted coping cleric, about 40 years old, strongly built, with a red nose and a pimply face. The real truth, sir. They just draw all Russian forces to themselves for nothing. Oh, you're quite wrong in my case, the Swiss patient picked up in a soft and conciliatory voice. Of course, I can't argue because I don't know everything. But my doctor gave me some of his last money for the trip and kept me there for almost 2 years at his own expense. What? You mean there was nobody to pay? Asked the swarthy man. Mr. Pavlichev, who supported me there, died 2 years ago. Then I wrote here the General Epanchin's wife, my distant relation, but I got no answer. So with that, I've come back. Come back where, though? You mean where will I be staying? I don't really know yet, so. You haven't decided yet? And both listeners burst out laughing again. There's a trick that some people use to hide their emotional deficiencies. That's using big words that is rare words that so many people have not heard. And contrary to Bukowski, that he used words that's extremely simple. And as Leonard Cohen said, Bukowski even got the angels down, brought the angels down to earth. And I suppose that bundle contains your whole essence? The swarthy man asked. I'm ready to bet it does, the red-nosed clerk picked up with an extremely pleased air, and that there's no further belongings in the baggage car. Though poverty's no vice, that again is something one can't help observing. It turned out to be so. The blond young man acknowledged it at once and with extraordinary alacrity. Your bundle has a certain significance all the same. The clerk went on after they had laughed their fill. Remarkably, the owner of the bundle, looking at them, finally started laughing himself, which increased their merriment. And though you can bet it doesn't contain any imported gold packets of Napoleonder's Napoleonders, or fried rich doors, or any Dutch yellow bows. A thing that might be deduced merely from the gaiters enclosing your foreign shoes, but if to your bundle we were to add some supposed relation as General Epanchin's wife, then your bundle would take on a somewhat different significance. Naturally, only in the case that General Epanchin's wife is indeed your relation, and you didn't make a mistake out of absent-mindedness, which is quite human, well, say from an excess of imagination. Oh, you've guessed right again. The blond young man picked up. I'm indeed almost mistaken. That is, she's almost not my relation, so that I really wasn't surprised in the least when they didn't answer me there. I even expected it. Wasted your money, franchising the letter for nothing. But at any rate, you're simple-hearted and sincere, which is commendable. And General Epanchin we know, sir, essentially because he's a generally known man. And the late Mr. Pavlichev, who supported you in Switzerland, we also knew, sir, if it was Nikolai Andreevich Pavlichev, because there were two cousins. The other one is still in the Crimea, but the deceased Nikolai Andreevich was a respectable man and with connections and owned 4,000 souls in his time, sir. Just so, his name was Nikolai Andreevich Pavlichev, and having responded, the young man looked intently and inquisitively at Mr. Know-it-all. Nice. But like too much detail. Like Mozart with too many notes. These Mr. Know-it-alls are occasionally, even quite frequently, to be met within a certain social stratum. They know everything. All the restless inquisitiveness of their minds and all their abilities are turned irresistibly in one direction, certainly for lack of more important life interests and perspectives. As a modern thinker would say, the phrase "they know all" implies, however, a rather limited sphere where so-and-so works, who is acquainted with, how much he's worth, where he was governor, who he's married to, how much his wife brought him, who his cousins are, who his cousins twice removed are, etc., etc., all in the same vein. For the most part, these know-it-alls go about with holes at the elbows and earn a salary of 17 rubles a month. The people whose innermost secrets they know would, of course, be unable to understand what interests guide them. And yet many of them are positively consoled by this knowledge that amounts to the whole science. They achieve self-respect and even the highest spiritual satisfaction. Besides, it's a seductive science. I have known scholars, writers, poets, political activists who sought and found their highest peace and purpose in this science, who positively made their careers by it alone. During this whole conversation, the swarthy young man kept yawning, looking aimlessly out of the window and waiting impatiently for the end of the journey. He seemed somehow distracted, very distracted, all but alarmed, was even becoming somehow strange. Sometimes he listened without listening, looked without looking, laughed without always knowing or understanding himself why he was laughing. But excuse me, with whom do I have the honor? The pimply gentleman suddenly addressed the blond young man with the bundle. Prince Lev Nikolaevich Mishkin, the other replied with full and immediate readiness. Prince Mishkin? Lev Nikolaevich? Don't know it, sir. Never even so much as heard it, sir, the clerk replied, pondering. I don't mean the name. The name's historical. It can and should be found in Karamzin's history. I mean the person, sir. There is no Prince Mishkins to be met with anywhere, and even the rumors have died out. Oh, that's certain, the prince answered at once. There are no Prince Mishkins that all know except me. It seems I'm the last one. And as for our fathers and grandfathers, we have even had some farmers among them. My father, however, was a second lieutenant in the army from the Junkers. But I don't know in what way Mrs. Epanchin also turns out to be Princess Mishkin, also the last in her line. The last in her line? What a way to put it, the clerk tittered. The swarthy man also smiled. The blond man was slightly surprised that he had managed to make a pun, though a rather bad one. And imagine, I never thought what I was saying. He finally explained in surprise. That's clear, sir. The clerk merrily agreed. And say, Prince, did you do any studying there at your professor's? The swarthy man suddenly asked. Yes, I did. And me, I never studied anything. Well, I only did a little of this and that, the prince added almost apologetically. They found it impossible to educate me systematically because of my illness. You know the Rogozhins? The swarthy man asked quickly. No, not at all. I know very few people in Russia. Are you a Rogozhin? Yes, I'm Parfyon Rogozhin. Parfyon? You're not from those same Rogozhins, the clerk began with increased importance. Yes, the same, the very same. The swarthy man interrupted quickly, and with impolite impatience he had incidentally never once addressed the pimply cleric, but from the very beginning had talked only to the prince. But can it be? The clerk was astonished to the point of stupefaction. Means estupéfiant. It comes from French. It's wow, wow. Saying wow and getting astonished, like in a positive way. Not necessarily, but like, yeah, it's a positive way. His eyes nearly popped out, and his whole face at once began to compose itself into something reverent and obsequious, even frightened. Of that same Semyon Parfyonovich Rogozhin, the hereditary honorary citizen, who died about a month ago and left 2.5 million in capital? And how do you know he left 2.5 million in pure capital? The swarthy man interrupted. This time also not deigning, D-E-I-G-N-I-N-G. Deigning to glance at the clerk. Just look, he winked at the prince. And what's the good of them toading like the straight off? You see a lot of words like in terminologies. What's the use of that? It's true, my parent died, and I'm coming home from Psikov a month later, all but bootless. Neither my brother, the scoundrel, nor my mother sent me any money or any notice, nothing, like a dog. I spent the whole month in Psikov in delirium, and now you've got a nice little million or more coming, and that's at the least. Oh Lord, the clerk clasped his hands. Well, what is it to him? Pray tell me. Rogozhin nodded towards him again irritably and spitefully. I won't give you a kopeck, even if you walk upside down right here in front of me. And I will. Look at that. No, I won't give you anything. Not even if you dance a whole week for it. Don't give me anything. Don't. It serves me right. But I will dance. I leave my wife, my little children, and dance before you. Be nice. Pah! The swarthy man spat. 5 weeks ago he turned to the prince. I ran away from my parent to my aunt in Psikov, like you with nothing but a little bundle. I fell into delirium there, and while I was gone he up and died, hit by stroke. Memory eternal to the deceased. But he almost did me in before then. By God, prince, believe me. If I hadn't run away, he'd have done me to the death. Did you do something to make him angry? The prince responded, studying the milliner in the lambskin coat with some special curiosity. But though there might well have been something noteworthy in the million itself and in receiving an inheritance, the prince was surprised and intrigued by something else. Besides, Rogozhin himself, for some reason, was especially eager to make the prince his interlocuteur, someone that speaks in a conversation or in a speech. Though the need for an interlocuteur seemed more mechanical than moral, somehow more from distraction than from simple-heartedness, from anxiety, from agitation, just to look at someone and wag his tongue about something. It seemed he was still delirious, or at least in a fever. As for the clerk, the man simply hovered over Rogozhin, not daring to breathe, catching and weighing even every word, as if searching for diamonds. Angry, yes, he was angry, and maybe rightly. Rogozhin replied, but it was my brother who really got me. About my mother, there's nothing to say. She's an old woman. Reads the Menayon, sits with the old crones, and whatever brother Senka decides, so it goes. But why didn't he let me know in time? You understand that, sir? True, I was unconscious at the time. They also say a telegram was sent, but the telegram happened to come to my aunt, and she's been widowed for 30 years and sits with the Holy Fools from morning till evening. Anon or not anon, but worse still, she got scared of the telegram and took it to the police station without opening it, and so it's been lying there ever since. Only Konov Vasilyich rescued me. He wrote about everything. At night my brother cut the gold tassels off the brocade cover on the old man's coffin. They cost a whole lot of money, he says, but for that alone he could go to Siberia if I want, because that's blasphemy. Hey, you scarecrow! He turned to the clerk. What's the law? Is it a blasphemy? A blasphemy? A blasphemy? The clerk agreed at once. Meaning Siberia? Siberia, straight off to Siberia. They keep thinking I'm still sick. Rogozhin continued to the prince, but without saying a word secretly, I got on the train. Still sick and coming. Opened the gates, brother Semyonich. He said things to the old man about me, I know it. And it's true. I really irritated the old man Dan on account of Nastasia Filipovna. Nastasia Filipovna, that's my own doing. Sin snared me. On account of Nastasia Filipovna, the clerk said obsequiously, as if realizing something. You don't know her? Rogozhin shouted at him impatiently. Or maybe I do. The clerk replied triumphantly, well now, as if they're Sophie and Nastasia Filipovna's. And what? Yeah, dude. And what? Prince studied Rogozhin with curiosity. The man seemed still paler at that moment. Hounded, Rogozhin repeated, what do you know? He found out all about it at once. He continued to the prince, and Zalyuzhev also went blabbing to everybody he met. The old man took me and locked me upstairs and admonished me for a whole hour. I'm just getting you prepared now, he said. I'll come back later to say good night. And what do you think? The old grey fellow went to Nastasia Filipovna, bowed to the ground before her, pleaded and wept. She finally grabbed the box and threw it at him. Here are your earrings for you, great beard, and now they're worth 10 times more to me, since Parfyan got them under such a menace. Give my regards to Parfyan Semyonich, she says, and thank him for me. Well, and meanwhile, with my mother's blessing, I got 20 rubles from Seryushka Prutushin and went by train to Pskov and arrived there in a fever. The old women started reading prayers at me, and I sat there drunk. They went and spent my last money in the pot houses, lay unconscious in the street all night, and by morning was delirious, and the dogs bit me all over during the night. I had a hard time recovering. Well, sir, now our Nastasia Filipovna's going to start singing. The clerk tittered, rubbing his hands. Now, my good sir, it's not just pendants. Now we'll produce such pendants. If you say anything even once about Nastasia Filipovna, by God, I'll give you a whipping. Even if you did go around with Likhachev, cried Rogozhin, seizing him firmly by the arm. If you whip me, it means you don't reject me. Whip me. Do it and you put your mark on me, but here we are. Indeed, they were entering the station. Though Rogozhin said he had left secretly, there were several people waiting for him. They shouted and waved their hats. Ha! Zalyuzhev's here too, Rogozhin muttered, looking at them with a triumphant and even as if spiteful smile, and he suddenly turned to the prince. Prince, I don't know why I've come to love you. Prince, I don't know why I've come to love you. Maybe because I met you at such a moment. Though I met him too. He pointed to Lebedev. And I don't love him. Come and see me, Prince. We'll take those wretched gaiters off you. I dressed you in a top-notch marten coat. I have the best of tailcoats made for you. A white waistcoat, or whatever you like. I'll stuff your pockets with money and we'll go to see Nastasia Filipovna. Will you come or not? Hearken, Prince Lev Nikolaevich Lebedev picked up impossibly, that's Turkish accent, imposingly and solemnly. Don't let it slip away. Don't let it slip away. Don't let it slip away. Prince Mishkin rose a little, courteously offered Rogozhin his hand and said affably, I'll come with the greatest pleasure, and I thank you very much for loving me. I may even come today if I have time. Because I tell you frankly, I like you very much, and I especially like you when you were telling about the diamond pendants. Even before the pendants, I liked you. Despite your gloomy face, I also thank you for promising me the clothes and the fair coats. Because in fact, I'll need some clothes and a fair coat soon, and I have almost no money at the present moment. There'll be money towards evening. Come. There will be, the clerk picked up. Towards evening, before sundown, there will be. And are you a great fancier of the female sex, Prince? Someone who fancies things. Imagining, with fetish and these kind of things. And are you a great fancier of the female sex, Prince? Tell me beforehand. No. Maybe you don't know, but because of my inborn illness, I don't know women at all. Wow. Well, in that case, Rogozhin exclaimed, you come out as a holy fool, Prince, and God loves your kind. The Lord God loves your kinds, the clerk picked up. And you come with me, pencil pusher, Rogozhin said to Lebedev, and they all got off the train. Lebedev ended up with what he wanted. Soon the noisy band withdrew in the direction of Voznesensky Prospect. The prince had to turn towards Liteinaya Street. It was damp and wet. The prince inquired of passers-by. To reach the end of his route, he had to go some 2 miles and decided to hire a cab. General Leponchin lived in his own hut. Okay, I'm gonna stop here, and it's gonna be okay. Let me see. I want to put a. That was a pain, man. That was painful. I didn't get interested to read this crap at all. It was so crappy. Just useless description. No content. And a lots of fuss and buzz and hype. Oh, Fyodor Dostoyevsky, idiot, is one of the books ever written. Just praise for Piver and Volokhonsky's translation of Crime and Punishment. Reaches as close to Dostoyevsky Russian as is possible in English. The original's force and frightening immediacy is captured. The Piver and Volokhonsky translation will become the standard English version. Chicago Tribune. Fuck you. Richard Piver and Larissa Volokhonsky. Masterful translation of The Idiot is destined to stand with their versions of Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, and Demons as the definitive Dostoevsky in English. After his great portrayal of the guilty man in Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky set out in The Idiot to portray a man of pure innocence. I didn't see any innocence. The 26-year-old Prince Mishkin, following a stay of several years in Swiss sanitarium, returns to Russia to collect an inheritance and be among people. Even before he reaches home, he meets the dark Rogozhin, a rich merchant's son whose obsession with the beautiful Nastasia Filipovna, we heard her name, eventually draws all the three of them into a tragic denouement. In Petersburg, the prince finds himself a stranger in a society obsessed with money, power, and manipulation. Okay, now it's getting interesting. This is a waste of time. You can read it in 10 pages. 10 pages is going to be amazing, and you can start thinking and feeling. This is a waste of time reading all of this. A scandal escalates to murder as Dostoyevsky traces the surprising effect of this positively beautiful man on the people around him, leading to a final scene that is one of the most powerful in all of the world literature. Said who? Your mommy?